San Diego State wants to be in a new conference, but is there a new conference for them to be in?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host today, Isaac Shade, and oh boy, do we have a treat. Joining us today is our friend Spencer McLaughlin, the host of the Locked On Pac-12 Network. By the way, if you're watching, you can see that little watch next down in the corner. I even put watch the Locked On Pac-12 next just for you, Spencer.
Hey, we appreciate that.
And you know it. We want to thank you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch every single day. And by the way, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Spencer, happy NBA Draft Eve to you. I hope you are doing well on this Wednesday, June 21st. Speaking of which, coming up on the show today, folks, I'm going to pick Spencer's brain a little bit about the NBA Draft. We'll touch briefly on some of the Pac-12 candidates who will probably hear their name called tomorrow evening. But first, we have to unravel what in the world it is that's going on with the reigning national runner-up in the world of college basketball. Spencer, I've been thinking about it this way. Have you ever seen the movie The Terminal with Tom Hanks?
I cannot say that I have, no, but do enlighten me.
Here's what happens. His name is Victor Navorsky. He takes off from his home country of Krakosia to fly to Manhattan to hear some jazz music. It's a whole thing with his dad. Great sentimental movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones. While he's in the air trying to get to America, his country goes into some kind of civil war, and he is no longer the citizen of any country. And so when he lands, he gets like annexed in LaGuardia or whichever New York airport it is. And it's like he's a man that can't go anywhere because his passport's no good. So he's taken off from his home country, declared his intent, but now that is no longer a viable option. And now he can't leave into America either because they don't want him either. I keep thinking about the Aztecs. I know it's not a perfect one-to-one kind of thing with what's going on, but it makes a little bit of sense to me. Spencer, there's been all these rumors about San Diego State wanting to leave the Mountain West, and you have been doing a great job covering this on Locked On Pac-12, and so we wanted you to come today and just would you help catch us up to speed with what in the world's going on here?
Yeah, these are not rumors that they want to leave the Mountain West. It is now out in the open. They have declared their intentions to do so. Now, that announcement, which was first reported by Pete Thamel a couple of days ago, was not the formal documentation process of leaving the Mountain West. It was a statement of declaration, but with a little bit more seriousness than Michael Scott's "I declare bankruptcy." So it's a little bit more on the nose and like factual than that. So the Mountain West has in turn responded, sending a letter to San Diego State.
On Friday, correct? That came?
No, so the letter came out a couple days ago as well. I could have that wrong. Even for me, this stuff is just flying all over the place.
There's so much. Okay.
Right, but this is the latest as we record this show. So San Diego State, which has long been the top target for the Pac-12. That's what I have said. That's what a lot of other media people covering the Pac-12 have said. And there are a lot of reasons why they're the top option for that. Getting to the national championship game in men's basketball, a conference, which as we'll get to later, the Pac-12 kind of stinks. That doesn't hurt, but that's not even one of the top 5 reasons as to why. That's just kind of like a cherry on top of the sundae. It's nice. It looks really good. You'd rather have it than not to complete the look. But the meat of that sundae, or the core of it rather, are the scoops of ice cream, the banana, and the whipped cream and the chocolate sauce. So San Diego State wants to leave. Now, the deadline that we're all looking at here is June 30th, because on June 30th, per the Mountain West bylaws, the exit fee to depart the conference doubles from $17 to $34 million. So from $17 to $34 million. So San Diego State notified the Mountain West that they wanted to leave, and they requested an extension on that deadline, or perhaps a negotiation or a softening of that number of 17 to 34 million, maybe something closer to $20 million because they didn't want to pay all of that. And the reason they cited it was a conference realignment factors outside of their control. Translation, the Pac-12 media deal somehow, some way is not going to be done and completed by June 30th, so they can't sign them into the conference at that point in time. Now, in theory, I get this question all the time. The Pac-12 could, it's not as if a conference ceases to exist without a media deal. It just means they don't have that component. Now, I'm not privy to all of the legalese and terms and whatnot with regards to how it factors into adding an expansion team, but theoretically, you can add a team in expansion prior to having them be a part of your media deal and finalizing that contract. That's how all the other conferences have done it. Now, for reasons that we don't really know, the Pac-12 has decided not to do that, and they clearly want to do this all at one time. What that reason is, your guess is probably as good as mine. But the translation there of, hey, the Pac-12 won't be done by this date, then put the onus on the Mountain West to decide whether or not they would, as I put on my show yesterday, acquiesce to the request, a la the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. What is it? How would that even benefit Mountain West? Like, I'm not doing you any favors. You're leaving me.
That's exactly what my takeaway was the day before. And then the report came out from Pete Thamel again, and he said, yeah, the Mountain West is playing hardball here, and they are not going to, give you these favors if you're going to leave the conference. No. And from the Mountain West standpoint, I completely understand that. So that kind of leaves us on the realignment front with three options, Isaac. First, and the one that I would love to have happen, but I don't find likely at this point in time because I'm never getting my hopes up about this thing ever getting completed on a reasonable timeline ever again, is the Pac-12 completes and signs its media deal before or on June 30th, and they add San Diego State and SMU. That'd be option number one. Option number two is somehow the Pac-12 agrees to intervene in the San Diego State Mountain West negotiations, which appear to be kind of tense, fractured at this point in time because of the way this is all going down. They intervene somehow and say, hey, how about we pay you a little bit more, but not the full, extra $17 million in addition to this and whatnot. And they help San Diego State financially there. Or the third option, and I pray this doesn't happen because I would like to add San Diego State and SMU for various reasons. San Diego State isn't added to the Pac-12 in this round of realignment, and they have to wait until the next year and join for 2025, and the Pac-12 could exist as a conference with 11 schools for the 2024-25 athletic season, and have San Diego State join the following year. And the reason they could do that is because the bylaws in the American Conference state that you are subject to, an exit fee of not necessarily a set amount, but in the tens of millions of dollars. It was $18 million for those three schools that left the American to join the Big 12. If you are leaving within 27 months of your announcement of departing the conference, then you are subject to, this higher exit fee. So SMU doesn't have a June 30th deadline the way that San Diego State does. So
they'd be okay.
So you could still add SMU, and it wouldn't change anything after June 30th. You could have 11 schools. Not sure how that would work, but you could have 11 schools for one season, and then San Diego State comes the following year to make it once again the Pac-12. So that's the most brief rundown I can give you on kind of where things stand right now. The most likely option here is it goes past June 30th, but somehow I think option two is the most likeliest. Goes past June 30th, but the Pac-12, San Diego State, Mountain West get together, figure out, kind of a softer but larger than $17 million perhaps exit fee, and then they end up completing the media deal at some point in time in the month of July, because that's been hinted at before. I'm not inclined to trust those deadlines that presidents and ADs give us because they've been wrong so many times. I think that's the most likely. I think second most likely is the deal gets done before June 30th, and I think it's the least likely, though not impossible, that you have this 11 team for one seat, or stay at 10. They could also just stay at 10 maybe for a year or two and then add San Diego State and SMU later. We're just going to have to wait and see how that all plays out. But that's kind of the latest across the board.
Spencer, you did a wonderful job succinctly bringing that all together. I do have a couple questions about it. We've got to get to those. I want to know, how does SDSU pay the Pac-12 back if this happens? How does Kliavkoff help kind of negotiate all of this? And where do they go this year if things don't get worked out? Can they go back to the Mountain West? I'm going to ask Spencer those questions here in just a second. But first, this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by our friends at Birddogs. I don't know how else to say it, so folks, I'll just keep it simple. Birddog shorts and pants, they just make you look good. For example, the Birddog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. And Spencer, I need all the help I can get with that look, my friend. Listen, they fit better than regular shorts made of like stiff cotton. They've invented this like cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches to give you that slimmer fit without restricting your movement. Perhaps most important of all this summer, they also use anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So, folks, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege right now for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You're not going to want to take your bird dogs off all summer long. We promise you. Folks, as we said earlier, today is NBA Draft Eve, and we want to make sure you don't miss a second of the Locked On NBA Draft live tomorrow night. Pick-by-pick analysis from our stable of local NBA hosts, national reaction from our NBA big board hosts like Rafael Barlow, and live check-ins from the NBA Draft. Locked On NBA Draft Live, starting at 7:30 Eastern tomorrow night, Thursday, on the Locked On NBA YouTube page. Now, Spencer, we got to bring a little bit of your show to our show here, folks. If you've ever watched Locked On Pac-12 or Locked On Oregon, you know that Spencer is an H2O man. This dude loves water, and they always have the second segment sip after the ad reads to kick off the second segment. So, Spencer, cheers. I'm going to drink out of my
cheers indeed.
My water bottle.
It's to keep you refreshed, refurbished, avoid sore throat, and dry mouth simultaneously. It is multifaceted and essential to delivering the highest quality product possible. I can't do my shows without it.
Listen, thank goodness for water and what it's done for us. I'm all in on the second segment sip. Now, so Spencer, let's get back to this whole thing. So let's take it first with the financial side of it. If the Pac-12 and Commissioner Kliavkoff was able to negotiate something with the Mountain West Conference, if I understand you correctly, the Pac-12 would help float some of that money to San Diego State. And if that's correct, would they then just negotiate the conference something with San Diego State where over the course of several years, 5 easy payments of $59 or whatever the infomercials say, is that the kind of situation we're looking at here?
Well, the interesting thing is that the Mountain West also explicitly stated they weren't going to allow a kind of structured payment plan either, that they wanted it all, like it was an all or nothing sort of deal here. Now, the fascinating component is that the paperwork hasn't been signed for them to leave, but the Mountain West has stated that they have interpreted San Diego State's, statement about we intend to leave the Mountain West. They have interpreted that and are receiving it as a formal resignation and departure from the conference. But that hasn't actually been finalized yet. So we're kind of in new territory on that front. Now, again, what sort of arrangement can be made between, those three actors, San Diego State and the Mountain West and the Pac-12? My understanding is it's not unprecedented for conferences to, pay other conferences when they take their teams or give them some money along the way. I believe that's mostly handshake sort of agreement stuff, which, amongst college administrators and conference commissioners, it's not as if it'd be the first time that ever came to fruition. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, but that is speculative on my part. I'm not reporting that is happening or anything like that. But I think that what happens in the next week or so will determine which of these three scenarios ultimately comes to pass, whether they get the deal done, they have to extend, or they can't add San Diego State in this round. And I don't think that one is as likely here. But the other thing I thought about when I saw this stuff from the Mountain West, Isaac, is this a negotiation tactic, right? Is this something that they're doing where, look, they know San Diego State's been very open and honest about the fact that they want to go to the Pac-12. And they are prepared to do that in several facets, academically and athletically, and geographically as well. They're in a spot that the Pac-12 has to have a presence in. So when you think about the fact that they're kind of destined to leave anyway, if the Mountain West is aware of that hey, we can't stop them from eventually leaving one day, then what are you going to do as a conference? You're going to act in your own best interests, and you're going to try to get the best exit deal possible. So 100%. If they didn't come out and put out this hardline stance of we won't give you an extension, we won't allow a structured payment plan, we're not going to give you any of your concessions or anything like that, it could very well be that they mean that, and it could very well be that they would keep San Diego State in the conference if these deadlines come and go and San Diego State doesn't want to pony up an extra $17 million in addition to what they're going to have to pay to the Mountain West regardless now and in the future. But it could also be that the Mountain West knows that San Diego State's going to leave, and they're just trying to, finagle their way to the best possible exit deal, to the best possible financial situation where they get the most out of it. And sometimes taking a hardline stance and setting that as kind of your, baseline negotiation starting point. And then as time goes on, working to come back to the center. The further out to the left or right you start, the closer to the left or right you will be if you end up somewhere in the middle throughout the course of those negotiations. Yeah. So I think that's entirely possible here. And I don't have an instinct as to which way this is all going to play out. But I think the Mountain West is acting in a very logical way here, one way or the other. Whether they mean to put their foot down and they actually would, enforce those strict hardline rules and whatnot, or not, I think it makes sense to put that statement out there.
Yeah. Spencer, before we get to the question of where do you think San Diego State ultimately lands for this upcoming season? One other financial question is if we're trying to hit that, that June 30th deadline, 9 days from when this show is airing, what is the holdup at this point with the media rights deal for the Pac-12? I mean, it feels like from the outside looking in, it just feels like it's been a complete cluster, which the Pac-12 network has been all along, quite frankly.
Well, this is the multi-million-dollar question, and I have long pondered on my show, and am still wondering as we record the show and as you listen to it. I promise I'm still thinking about it. I would really like to know one day what exactly took this long. And I get the sense that we will once the deal eventually comes out, whenever that is. But there are a lot of different factors at play in this deal, and adding expansion teams that bring in desirable media markets.
Especially as you lose Southern California, you got to get a piece of it back.
Right. That can be a complicating factor. If you're adding SMU and you bring in the Dallas market, even if that's, people love to say, oh, SMU is like the fifth brand in Texas. Yeah, I know. I know. But it's just the meme. Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of people there. Second of all, SMU has a bunch of money. Third of all, they were really, really good back in the day before they got the death penalty for stuff that everybody does now, which is paying players and whatnot. I don't remember everything about that scandal, but I know that was kind of at the forefront of it. And then the fourth thing is just having a presence in Dallas, which is a top, I believe, 5 media market in the United States, that can inherently change the valuation of the deal. Now, because it's SMU, it's probably not in a hugely significant way, but these are long-term projections that media companies and entities have to make. So my best guess on why the deal is taking so long to complete when everybody else has got a deal and whatnot and they're signing this is I think it's almost assured the fact that we are going to have a new player in the college football broadcasting space, whether that's Apple or Amazon or a secondary cable partner like the CW or Ion TV or I don't know. There have been a bunch of options that have been floated around at one point in time or another. Right. But I don't think the deal takes this long if you don't have somebody who is new into the space. Yeah, an interloper. I don't think it takes this long to get done if you don't have a new player in there, because they are doing, when you are undertaking something for the first time, that requires a lot of logistics, that requires a lot of approval, that requires a lot of new contracts. And I think it can also complicate trying to allocate and adjudicate who gets what games, who's got the biggest games. So, for instance, Washington this year is going to play at Michigan State. That game is going to be exclusively on Peacock. That is a big deal. That is a big, big deal. And that's a part of the new Big Ten contract. And figuring out how those games get decided, because what I have heard talking to people in the media industry about that particular move is they are putting that game on Peacock, not because it's a jab at Washington or Michigan State, but quite the opposite. Because Washington will be a top 10 team. Michigan State has got a decently respectable brand. It's early in the year. It's a pretty good, appealing non-conference matchup. And they want to get people used to the idea of big-time games being exclusively on streaming. So when you have, and by the way, the Big Ten's got a lot of streaming components to its deal. And guess what? It was done, and then it wasn't done because they hadn't figured everything out, and they're now having to finalize those details. I don't remember if they had at this point in time. Right. But so the Pac-12, if they're involving, Apple seems to be the most likely partner to get involved there. They're going to be, on the front line saying, hey, we don't want your third tier games here. Like, we don't want our only college football games to be between teams with a losing record. Don't give us Cal and Colorado.
Oregon State, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, Oregon State is really good now, but are they the biggest television draw? No.
Exactly.
I think that's part of what's complicating all of this is you have a new entity involved, and they have to figure out what the pricing is, what the valuation is, and are you going to add this team or that team? How many in expansion? What does that do to the valuation? I think it's been kind of a lot of guess and check, right? We all remember that from math tests growing up. I think it's been a lot of guess and check, not just with what the value of Pac-12 sports is to the media companies, but also how much those media companies are able to get from the Pac-12 in terms of, the other point I meant to make before I cross that up is how much the Pac-12 is going to be, looking at this option versus that option, right? So what they're trying to find is the right combination of linear partners, streaming partners, and financial dollars. And I think they've kind of gone down and done the math, which probably takes weeks, maybe months, don't know, and said, okay, what about this deal with this allocation of games and tier 1 and tier 2 rights and whatnot, and it'll pay the schools this much a year. And they brought it back to the presidents, and they said, nope, not good enough, because presidents, as we all know, if you listen to my show at least anyway, vote on realignment, and they've got, the power here, and they have to sign off on all of this stuff. So I think there's been a component of that, but I do think there is an unknown quantity. The economy, frankly, could be a part of it. The optics of media companies in the midst of an economic downturn and an inflationary spiral, the way the U.S. and the world are frankly in right now, that can be a detractor to a company saying, hey, Apple may, our stock may be going down like this, but we're going to announce a, $100 million a year commitment for the next 6 years to have Pac-12 sports starting in 2024. That might not be what they want to do. So there are a lot of things like that you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I suggest that all of those are contributing factors, but I do there is something else. There's got to be something else that is driving the consistent pushback and delay of the timeline for the Pac-12 and their media deal here.
So, Spencer, end of the day, in the short term, where is San Diego State in your mind in the next couple years? Is it the Pac-12? Is it back in the Mountain West?
I think it's
Big 12 or something else? It's Pac-12.
I'm supremely confident they end up in the Pac-12. There's been too much interplay, too many comments, too many remarks, too much action happening for San Diego State, and for the Pac-12 in a negative way, too much action for the Aztecs to not get at it. Like they are a layup addition to the conference because they're in Southern California. They've got the academic standing. They're not AAU, but they want to be. They're an R1 institution. I'm pretty sure they're R1, or at least aspiring to be on that front. But culturally, academically, they align, and that matters to Pac-12 presidents as much as any conference in the country. And athletically, They've had some great football seasons. They've got a new stadium. They've got great facilities. Right. They're in a great recruiting location as well down in San Diego. And their men's basketball team would immediately be a top 3 program because, as we're about to get to, I imagine, Pac-12 basketball kind of sort of stinks.
Yeah. Yes, and it's an unfortunate blow for the Mountain West Conference, who just broke through to the Elite Eight in the Final Four National Championship game for the first time, and then they lose that school to the Pac-12. Yikes, stinks for them, but we'll see what happens with the Mountain West Conference. Now, as Spencer just said, that's where we got to go next. Tomorrow is the NBA draft, and we had a mock draft here on the Locked On Network. And folks, not a single Pac-12 player was taken in the first round. Why do the NBA hosts of Locked On hate on Spencer's conference? We're going to talk about that in just a second. NBA draft tomorrow night. We are joined right now by the host of Locked On Pac-12, Spencer McLaughlin. And Spencer, historically, this is a very proud basketball conference. The conference of what?
Champions.
Yes, that's correct. Bill Walton would like us all to remember that very well. And here's the thing. There are some phenomenal college basketball players that have come out of the Pac-12 last season that are in this year's NBA draft, but we have no slam dunk lottery picks, no slam dunk top 10 picks. We have some guys, I think when the draft actually goes down, I really think somebody like Jaime Jaquez is going to sneak into the back end of the first round.
But the first round?
I really wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
I would.
Okay, good.
I would be surprised if it were Jaquez. I wouldn't be surprised if it were Tubelis.
Okay, so do you think Azuolas Tubelis will be the highest taken Pac-12 player in the 23 NBA draft?
He is the player who I would take if you were asking me to do a draft of Pac-12 basketball players in this year's class, I would take Tubelis first.
Okay, why so?
I think the diversity in his game and the multiplicity with which he can score and attack, his touch, his feel, IQ, he's got good size, presents a little bit of a unique quality being a lefty and such. I see a guy who, isn't necessarily a superstar in the NBA, but if you told me he floats around on NBA teams for the next 10 years and is a 10 to 12 point a game scorer, coming off the bench, making some spot starts, yeah, I would definitely believe that. And look, I've loved watching Jaime Jaquez over the last several years, but some guys are just better college players than pro players, right? I mean, you see that with quarterbacks all the time in the NFL, and you see it in college basketball all the time. I mean, Jimmer Fredette was awesome. Guy's NBA career just has never really panned out. So I think when you look up and down, there just aren't that many high-level prospects. And I don't expect Tubelis to go in the first round. I mean, I think he'd be the most likely guy, but my alma mater, Santa Clara, is going to have probably a guy go in the first round before, or have a player drafted before the Pac-12 does, which is not a great thing to say, by the way. It's factual. Like, Brandon Podziemski is most likely taken in the top 15 to 20, and
You think he'll go that high?
He's ranked number 19 right now. NBA draft prospects.
Man, I mean, I'm all in the Podziemski train. I can't believe he'll go that high. That's wild.
Okay. Oh no, I could totally see it. I don't think anyone's taking him as like a foundational piece, but I look at him and I see Luke Kennard with a better mid-range game. And that's an NBA player.
Dude, I feel like he's more of a dude than Kennard too.
Yeah. No, Kennard is like 100% a big-time role player, and I think he showed that. He's on Memphis this year, yeah. Like, really, really good at what he does. I think Pods has got a little bit more of a mid-range game and better touch in there, but guy's got a really easy shooting motion. He's got a deep bag. He's sneaky athletic. I like Pods. I think he's a first-round kind of talent. And again, I would take him over anybody. Like, if I were an NBA GM, I would draft it. Now, it depends on need. It 100% depends on need. But I think he and Tubelis are at least on similar footing. I think Pods is probably a little bit higher. because of his athleticism, and I think both are probably above Jaquez, who I do like. I mean, I think Jaquez can play in the NBA as a bench guy and, maybe a spot starter every now and then, but, big time player, no, I think Pods and Tubelis would have a better chance of doing that than him.
So, Spencer, and I love that we're pushing back on each other like this also. That makes for good content. Anyway, here's the question. I said it coming into the segment here on the Locked On NBA mock draft, which was just a first round mock, all 30 picks. There was not a single Pac-12 player taken. In your opinion, was your conference slighted by the Locked On NBA hosts, or did they make the right call in not drafting any Pac-12 players in that first round?
No, they weren't slighted at all. I mean, I don't see how you could, in good faith, after watching the Pac-12 basketball season, say they were slighted. You could make an argument, perhaps, for a guy like Tubelis or Jaquez for being a high pick in there. Peterson from USC, I think, is coming out too. Intriguing player, but I don't look at any of them and think, oh yeah, no, definitely they have to be a first rounder. What's happening here? What
about Amari Bailey? What about Amari Bailey? Where do you think he'll land?
It's like Shabazz Muhammad Light, like again, that's an NBA player. Like, he's good shooter, good athlete. Like, anytime you can shoot, you can do something. If you played for a coach as big time as Mick Cronin, you probably have some NBA pedigree in there. But, he would be a guy, like, if he really popped, it would be like Devin Booker popping coming from Kentucky. Whereas, like, he wasn't even a star player on his team in college. How is he a star player on a team in the NBA? Well, I don't know. Sometimes guys are just like that. They don't have the right role in college. Coach doesn't play them enough for whatever reason. But again, I look at all those guys and I say, I see how they could have successful NBA careers. I also look at all of them, Jaquez included, and say, if you told me they were out of the league in 5 years, I'd believe that too.
Yeah.
I would, because I don't see a super high floor draft pick from the Pac-12 this year. I don't see it. Tubelis, I really, really like him. He's skilled, versatile, productive. He's a better rebounder than you think, but he's not the biggest, most athletic guy in the world. Like, I'm trying to picture him going one-on-one with Draymond Green. I think Draymond's going to shove him into the fourth row. It might be a foul.
Draymond's playing for next year, by the way.
But I mean, it might be a foul on Draymond Green, but still, when you get pushed into the fourth, I'm just saying, like, Tubelis I'm not saying he's not a soft guy necessarily, but I don't think of him and think, oh, that's peak physicality.
Beef. He's a beefy dude.
Yeah,
it's not true of him.
He's not clearing space down low like Shaq. Exactly. Doesn't mean he can't play down low. He's got great touch. We know all those international guys are, often really, really highly skilled like that. But no, I don't think the Locked On NBA hosts are slighting the Pac-12 at all.
Yeah, I'm sure Umar Bala was moving him out of the way in practice a time or two last season.
Yeah,
man, that's great stuff, Spencer. Really excited to see what actually goes down tomorrow night in the NBA draft, and hopefully Spencer and I are both wrong, and we'll see what happens on any of this. Man, it's just fun to speculate on for sure.
Well, I actually don't know that I would want to be wrong on that. Number one, because I'm an egomaniac, but number two, because if the Pac-12 gets slighted like that, and then the narrative is you didn't have a first round pick, how in the world could you not create one of 30 players as an entire conference? Maybe that'll serve as a wake up to Pac-12 basketball programs and coaches of can you figure it out, please? And just make. Now, there are some encouraging signs. There are some discouraging signs. Jared Haas and Mike Hopkins still having jobs. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Mark Madsen getting hired at Cal. I know what we're doing here. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. So I for people who don't know, one of my other jobs is I do play-by-play for Southern Utah University in the Western Athletic Conference. So I've spoken with Mark Madsen before on the phone. Really, really good guy. Really, really good coach. And I've called a couple of his games the last couple of years, and I've seen what he can do with his teams. He had them; they were a tournament caliber team a year ago. They just happened to lose to Southern Utah, blowing a 17-point lead in 15 minutes in the WAC conference tournament semifinals. But Madsen did a great job at Utah Valley, a great job. And he could potentially, even though it's a tough place to be, the early indications are strong that he will succeed at Cal. If he succeeds at Cal as a Stanford graduate, that is an all-time whiff. That is an all-time whiff by the Cardinal, because I don't think he would leave Cal now unless he was asked to, because that would just, might rub people the wrong way. But he's got them investing in the program more. He's bringing in transfers.
Yep.
I'm just telling you, that guy can coach. He's really, really good. And he's a Stanford grad. And the Cardinal decided to run it back with Jared Haas rather than moving on from him. Like, you gave him a fair chance.
You need the mad dog.
It's you gave him more than a fair chance. You could have brought in Madsen. And if he goes to Cal and knocks it out of the park the way I suspect he will, Stanford's going to look back and go, what the hell were we doing?
I think the phrase is they will rue the day.
They will rue the day, Carly Shea.
Well, it's going to be another interesting season in the 23-24 academic year for the Pac-12. Going to be some interesting happenings for USC. We'll see who is the top dog in this conference. We'll have to talk with Spencer leading up to the season to talk more about some power rankings for the Pac-12. As for today's episode, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. You can go follow our guy Spencer on Twitter at Smalls_5555. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnCBB or me at Isaac Shade. If you would, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars. Talk about why you love the show. Please make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, give us your comments on your thoughts on both San Diego State and the NBA draft as it relates to Pac-12 players. As always, apologies to the Lawyers family. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.